Hello there, we're going to do another MagJS tutorial. This is actually going to be a part 2 of the one we did for React. It's the classic React example, a comment box. Um, you can look at it here, and this is the tutorial we're following. So we did the comment list, which had the comment component, and now we're going to go to the form itself, okay? So why don't we see what that looks like here? So we see there's a comment form added. Let's go back to the work we've already done. Let's look at our HTML. So as you know, we have all of our component templates hidden over here. Again, however they are accessed doesn't matter. You can dynamically create them in JavaScript. You can load them remotely. The point is that you reference them when you define your Mag component. And here we have our comment list. So the simplest way to wire one thing to another, as we know, is first, let's grab the form itself here. All right, so let's get our first create the template, right? So our comment form template. So we give it a unique ID to reference it. Put in our HTML here. Let's just do a little cleanup. Class name is not valid HTML. All right, now the next thing we want to do is we want to put a placeholder where we want it to appear in our actual app. Okay, so we're going to put it right below the list itself, which might seem counterintuitive, but we'll do that for now. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to wire it together, kind of similar to what we've done already in the controller. But before we even do that, we first have to create the component itself. So let's do that. So we're going to say common form equal mag common form and then our object instance. Now you can always create a stateless one. If you want to create a stateless component, you would just put a function here instead of an object. The difference though is that it would not have any state, it would only have the props. So in the form, we're going to need some state to remember the values. Okay, so we have our component, we have our placeholder in our app, we even have our common form template, our HTML. So the next thing we want to do is we want to wire together, very similar to what we already have here in the controller. So we're just going to say this comment form equals comment form component, and we don't really need to pass it anything right now, like that. Okay, and now you can see right there on the bottom, we have our form. I mean, this is just taking HTML here and inserting it here based on what we have over here. So why don't we follow the tutorial and see what's next? So it talks about control components and how to access values and things like that. Now, in MagJS, it's very intuitive. We don't have to do all this boilerplate setup. If we want to access a field, why don't we first create our view function state. I think that's all we need for right now is our state. And we want to access this input type, right? And we have a form. So it says here in the tutorial is do an on change event handler, um, then create the handler, then set the text from the target. That's a lot of boilerplate. And, technology should not be a hindrance, it should not be the stumbling block of development. Development should be fluid, should be productive, and technology should enable that, not hinder that. So in MagJS, you can add an event to anything you want. And in here, I think it would make sense to do it to the form. Okay, and we probably want to capture on submit. So however the form gets submitted, whether that's typo, whether that's from an enter or from clicking the button, the submit button, it will capture it here. And we probably want to prevent default. So the event gets passed in here. You see e.prevent default, just like it sounds, without the typo. And here we can capture anything we want. And there's some creative ways that MagJS allows you to capture things. So if you wanted to get an input, you can just, we're going to do alert here to make this obvious. We're going to say state.input. And this will give us our input value. Why don't we try that? So I'm going to say something here. Oh, that's a name. So let me put my name. Okay, press enter button, and it says Mike. That's it. It's really simple. Um, we can also set things from the JavaScript. We can say state input equals something. I'll show you that quickly. Equal. Now you notice it's updating both. And the reason for that is that even though this is a first selector, the first one it finds, these are both on the same uh, element level or sibling. So it's almost considered the same thing. But if this was nested, in other words, the second input field was with inside a div or something, which it normally happens in a label or something, but you wanted both, you would use your greedy selector, which is a $sign like that. We don't need either of that right now. I just wanted to show you how to get the input. But as you know, there's two fields here, not just one. So we want Mike and we want to say hi, right? So if we do that, we still only get Mike. How do we get the other one? Well, there's a couple ways to do that. First, I'll show you maybe the not so intuitive, but we can use our dollar sign here to grab that. Now, dollar is going to give us a lot of information, so why don't we output that first and see what that looks like? I'll just open our nifty console here. All right, so let me enter some information. Now you can see we got three different things because there's three inputs on that level. And you see it adds the value because those are of value input type. Well, this type is a submit. That's why you don't see the value. So what else is in here? That's pretty much it, right? Okay, so now we know how to get the value of the first two input fields. We can simply say 0._value. And just do that again, but we're going to do it for our second guy. So that would be, instead of the 0, we're going to add the 1. All right, why don't we try that out now? Let's see, enter. Oh, we're not doing an alert anymore. Let's put it back to an alert. And there we go, Mike Yo. All right, so it's pretty straightforward. There's another way you can also access it besides input, which is maybe not so clear. The other way, which is maybe a little simpler, we can just say author, and you can use our name attribute here, and text. That's probably a little bit clearer. Just wanted to show you the multiple ways to do things. So this is a lot easier to read. Let's just verify that that works as expected. And there you go, we still see it. Let's go back to the tutorial and see what is the next thing. So it talks about submitting the form. Besides all the boilerplate, it adds some stuff into our handle submit, which we already have. It added the prevent default, which we added. It shows you ways to get and trim. We don't need to do all that, but we can do this part here. It's basically saying don't reset it if one of them are empty. So why don't we do the same thing? So we're going to say if either of these guys are empty, just do a quick return. Or else we're going to set the author, we set it back to basically nothing. All right, so why don't we check that out? So if I add both, oops, oh, missing the, okay, there we go. Let's try that again. Take two. So if I set both, I click enter, they're reset to nothing. But if I only set one, it doesn't do anything. Either one. So I set this one, nothing. So your text is still there. Okay, moving along, let's see what the next thing it wants us to do. Now, here's talking about callback as props. What it's saying here is that we should add to our comment form a property to pass down from the parent, something to handle the comment submit. So why don't we do that? This is just a little stub here. So and then we're going to need the props, obviously. But first, we're just going to add that to our comment box. Obviously, it's JavaScript. This function can be anywhere. It could be inline. But just for separation of concerns, we're going to put it right here. Say dot. Okay. And there we go. Now we have to pass it down. So how do we pass it down? We pass this function into the form through its props. And I believe it was on comment submit. We're going to say this dot. Okay. Now we're still in the state, so let's verify what we have in our this over here. Let's just verify that that's there. So this is not the actual object, it's our state, as you can see here. So in the controller, we would have to call the comment box directly. So let's just do that to keep things moving along here. And let's verify that it's on comment submit, I believe. Yes, okay. So we have our function, we're passing it down, and now we have to call it. So why don't we go back into our comment form and actually call that. And I believe it was right before you reset it. You want to call it, and you're calling it through your props, and you're passing it into as a new object, so there's not through the reference. You could always pass the state, but then that would be a reference, and things might get a little tricky there. So here we're just basically making a copy of the values in their current state right then. And of course, we're going to need access to the props in our view. So that should be all we need to do in the comment form, really, at this point. Following the tutorial, I think our next step here is to actually handle the comment submit. And there's something called optimistic updates. And also, we're not going to necessarily do a server in this example. But we do want to do this. We want to grab the comment. We want to concatenate it to our current comments. And then we want to set state to the new one so it reruns our comment list. So let's see how that would happen in MagJS. Okay, I think we can get rid of our console there. I don't think we really need our HTML as well either. So why don't we just have a nice big window open here? So I'm taking, yes, I'm taking all that. And I'm going to put it over here like this. Now, in MagJS, we don't have a this set state. So we're going to have to bind to this. And now, this data will be our new comments. Now we also have to change it up over here then. So this dot data equals our props dot data. And here we can update it like that. So that should be all we need to do. Let's just first see if that works. It does not look like it's binding to it. And there could be multiple reasons for that. The main reason is that we're in the controller, and the controller only gets called once. So we basically need to put all of this into the view, or at least the data list, the comment list. So why don't we do that? Why don't we create our comment box.view equals our function with our state. Now we've added the properties to the state so it's accessible. We have to now call the state. So when the state changes, we will have access to that because it will call the view. So when state gets updated, meaning this data gets updated, it runs the view function. And the view function is calling our comment list, which will always have a reference to the state. So let's see if that works. And there you go. So now you can see how you can add things dynamically, as well as instantiate them and attach them to references, attach them to functions, whether they're inside, we could have done an inline function in here as well, or functions that exist outside, whether in the same namespace or not. It could be anywhere. And this would then rerun the comment list when the state got updated, which is always passing it the state anyways. So that pretty much covers our tutorial at this point. We didn't really get into server-side requests or anything like that. A simple way to test something like that, though, is you can do a delay. And all that means is that you would set timeout. So this idea here is to basically emulate a delay. You're emulating the time it takes a server to respond in an asynchronous fashion. Now, we want to keep our scope this. So we'll do an arrow function. And we're going to do a short delay. We're going to say it takes 20 milliseconds, or maybe make it more noticeable. Let's say 150 milliseconds. It takes 150 milliseconds for our server to respond to adding a new comment. Let's see if that works. That wasn't that noticeable. Let's make it even longer. Let's say 950 milliseconds. That's almost 1 second. Let's see if we can see the delay and still see the update. And there it goes. We store the delay and we store the update. And this shows you that no matter when the state gets updated, it will rerun the view. Whether it's in a delayed, asynchronous fashion, request animation frame, anytime it will do that. So with that being said, we're going to close our tutorial now and finish it up. The link to it will, of course, be in the YouTube video description box. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye-bye.